So my theme is democracy. Now, democracy, the word, was a very bad word for 2,500 years, from the time of Plato until the 19th century, early 20th century. You were all reading Plato yesterday in bed. So you remember in his book, The Republic, book 8, he said, democracy is just the same thing as ochlocracy, means mob rule. It's immediately going to turn into anarchy. Why? Because people don't know enough. They don't have enough information. They're only interested in themselves. They don't care about other people. They only think about the near term, not about the long term. So the result is going to be a lot of quarrels and disagreements. You get anarchy. And anarchy is exhausting. Nothing can happen. Nothing can be done. And so the people will soon welcome a tyrant. They will welcome somebody who will come to restore order, somebody with power. So Plato thought that democracy is just the beginning, just the preface to tyranny, and he thought it a very bad idea. Now, there's only one thing I agree with Plato. Plato said that the people who should be in charge are philosophers. So, of course, I agree with that. But for 2,500 years, this powerful influence, Plato's thinking, made people feel that democracy was not to be considered. Whatever form of government there is, wherever we can source authority in the state, the justification for the rule, maybe God gave it to the king, or its power, its might that gives authority. Whatever the theory was, it didn't include democracy until the beginning of the modern period. Really, from the 17th century onwards, we saw philosophers and political scientists, other people thinking about this problem. And in the 19th century, we began to see the extension of the franchise, more people being included. And the idea behind democracy, even if people didn't use the word exactly, the idea came to have some grip, some purchase. You may remember that at the halfway point in the American Civil War, Lincoln said in the Gettysburg Address, he said, we are defending the idea of government of the people, by the people, for the people. This idea has taken now to be a kind of definition of what democracy is, even though at the time that Lincoln said this, the only people in the United States who had a vote were men, white men who owned property. Nobody else had a vote. So bit by bit, the idea that government by the people, for the people, is the idea that has the best chance of giving a society, giving a state, a sense of a legitimate source of political and governmental authority. That idea became more and more familiar and then entrenched. And in 1917, the President of the United States, Woodrow Wilson, when he was explaining to his people in the US why he was taking the US into the First World War, he said, it is to make the world safe for democracy. So this was the beginning of the idea that democracy is the thing, number one, most important and best system. Later, Winston Churchill said, it is the best of many bad systems. It's not a good system, but it's the best of a lot of bad systems. But Winston Churchill was also less idealistic than Woodrow Wilson because Churchill, also said, the strongest argument against democracy is 2 minutes conversation with any voter. And in this, of course, he was reprising Plato. He was reminding us of what Plato said. But the philosophers, the political scientists, the thinkers of the 18th century, 19th century, they had come with a solution. Plato's problem was that the people don't know enough, they're too short-termist, they're too self-interested, so how can putting power into the hands of the people, how can it produce good government? And they provided an answer, the idea of representative democracy, the idea of elections, the idea that the people will give temporary license, temporary permission to people to operate the systems, the institutions of government on behalf of the people. We vote for somebody to go to the parliament, to the Congress, to get the facts, get the information, listen to discussion, decide, debate, hear from the experts, make a judgment, act in the best interests of the people. This is the ideal, okay? This is what's meant to happen. And then if they do a good job, then maybe we will elect them again. If they do a bad job, we chuck them out. This is the idea of democracy, the ideal of democracy. So 2,500 years, democracy is a bad word. Maybe 100 years or so, it's a good word. It's such a good word that America will send its armies to make other people become democrats. Now, just in the last few years, people have become worried about democracy. It doesn't seem to be working. There are people who are dissatisfied with it. What's going wrong? Well, I just want to mention, because this is a very complex topic. They told me I had 15 minutes. I said I would like to arrange breakfast tomorrow morning for everybody. But this is a very complex topic, so I'm just going to pick two points, to try to understand why democracy is under threat. Because for all its problems, and it isn't perfect and can never be perfect, a democracy should be an arena where a society has a conversation with itself, a discussion with itself about how to manage, how to negotiate, how to compromise, how to live together, how to seek the best, how to try to include everybody, to encourage participation, and to make the society flourish. That's what it, in the ideal, should be, and we always have the hope that it can be like that. But what has gone wrong? Well, very briefly this. Since 1945, in the last 75 years, most of the countries in the world have become democracies. They've become democracies, those that weren't democracies before, because they wanted to emulate the example of the United States, Canada, Western Europe, Australasia, which were very successful, very influential, succeeding economically. Now, of course, there are some examples in the world, principally China, which is not a democracy and which is very successful economically and has grown very fast. So some people are thinking, hang on, maybe you don't need democracy to be economically successful. So the motivation for becoming democracies has diminished slightly. That's one thing. The other thing is that the major democracies in the world would not give aid, support, or help to developing countries unless they became democracies. So there was some inducement for countries to democratize. Those people who organize to capture the government, different political factions, organize themselves to capture the government so that they can push their agenda, have their agenda realized in society. This is the aim of political activity. Political activism is to win a majority. By the way, there is no such thing as a majority anywhere. There are lots of minorities. And sometimes on one day, the election day, some minorities join together to make a temporary majority. But that's what the political factions want to do. They want to capture that temporary majority so that they can occupy the institutions of government for 4 years or 5 years and put their agenda. So they compete with one another. This is very exhausting, the business of politics. It becomes a career. And career politicians learn how to make very good use of the levers of power, of the institutions. And so in capturing those levers, they are able to advance the interests of one faction or one section of the community. So the idea that democracy is for everybody, democracy is for all the people, comes to be democracy is for that part of the people who win the election, who win the institutions of government. And so we see partisanship and different kinds of policies and factionalism entering into government. Government becomes political. And political government means that not everybody in the society is going to feel that they are fully signed up for what is happening in their society. So that's one problem. Here's the other problem. Every society, in every period of history, everywhere in the world, is always changing, always moving. In the past, these changes were very slow. Today, they are very fast. Think about technological developments. Think about the internet and iPhones and mobile communications and everything that is happening in our world, the introduction of massive amounts of AI systems operating so much of what happens in our lives, these technological advances are very, very quick. So when the rate of change is fast, the people at the front, the entrepreneurs, the people who understand the new technology and the opportunities that they give, they flourish. But the people at the back, the people who are left behind, the people who don't understand the new technologies, the people who are too old to be re-employed, people in their 50s and 60s, the people who are left behind in the rust belt, as they call it, industries which are made obsolescent by these new developments, they, if they are not looked after properly, if the society doesn't take care of them, help to retrain them, give them different opportunities or provide a welfare net, then people at the back will become resentful. It's not a matter of absolute poverty or absolute deprivation. It's a matter of the perception of the relative difference between those who are succeeding and benefiting from the new changes, the new surprising, challenging world, and those people who are left behind, those people who feel left out of what's happening in society. It's also the case that with rapid transitions, you get an increasing inequality in society. Even if the whole society is becoming richer, still the gap between people who are very rich and people who are very poor can grow and grow. Inequality in any society is toxic. It's a poison. It's a danger in the society. Because the people who are left behind, the people who feel that they've been treated unfairly, that they are disregarded, they're left out of the new opportunities, resentment and frustration will be experienced by them. And it will reach a point. There will be something that will happen, a trigger, something that will spark that resentment into activism. Now, we've seen it in many places. We've seen it in the United States with the election of Trump. We've seen it in Europe, in Poland, in Hungary, in the United Kingdom with the stupid Brexit thing that's happening there. We've seen it in India. We've seen populism rising up because populism, which is something artificial, it's created by demagogues who see there are people who are unhappy, who are left behind, who are frustrated, who feel that they are disregarded by the people who are having success and the people who are in control. And the demagogues can go to them and say, I know what your problem is. I know who to blame. To blame the immigrants, blame the elite, blame the new technologies, blame the European Union, blame somebody, blame the Mexicans if you're Trump. Blame somebody, okay? And this is a way of gathering the anger, the frustration of people who feel left behind. Now, this actually is a very effective technique because you don't have to have many, many, many millions of people rising up to make an important change in society. Here is where something also new in our world, which is something that gives great opportunities and great benefits, but also has very serious downside, serious problems. And this, of course, is social media and the effect of social media on democracy. Let me explain very simply. Just recently, a friend of mine who lives in New York came to visit me in London. He said, you know, a strange thing happened to me. I put in my Google Calendar an appointment at a clinic in Manhattan. And for the next 3 days, I was bombarded by advertisements for my local crematorium. He was very surprised by this until he realized something. Google, Mr. Google, Senor Google, he knows what this clinic deals with. They know the doctor at this clinic that he's going to go to see. They know how old my friend is. They put 2 and 2 together. They have 22. They think it's time for you to look at your local crematorium. Because Mr. Google's algorithms, they know more about him than he knows about himself. The profiling is so accurate. It has so many data points. So here's what happens. Every single one of us here, I don't think anybody here paid one peso, 1 cent for your email, your Twitter, your WhatsApp. No, you didn't. But every time you press your device, your phone on, you are paying with your information. Because all these networks know so much about you, more than you know. If I ask you, What were you doing on Wednesday afternoon, second week of March, 3 years ago? Quick. No, you don't know. Google knows, and Twitter knows, WhatsApp knows, because they can just look it up like this and say, you were in that shop again, buying those shoes. So they know, okay? So they collect all this information, masses of information. They use data analytics to examine it, to profile people, to identify individuals and groups. And here is the secret. Here is the secret. In any election, in any referendum, there is this group and that group. Trump, Clinton, or Biden. Referendum, yes, no, in, out, black, white, left, right. And these people have made up their minds. They're not going to change their minds. They may even not follow the campaign because it's boring. But in between these two groups, there is a group of people who haven't made up their mind or who don't know what to vote. And if you can capture not everybody, but just some of this group, you can change the election. All elections and all referendums are won on very small margins. So if you can capture those people, then you can change everything. So I know, I've now got my data. So you like shoes, okay. So that lady likes shoes, another one likes shoes. So I make a little group out of you. I micro-target messages. I'm going to take away the tax on shoes. You think, I'm going to vote for him. Okay. I know you like guns. Somebody else likes guns. Somebody else, you want to shoot people. Right. I can make a little group of you. I say, I take away the tax on guns and I liberate guns. You say, you're going to vote for me. You don't like immigrants. You don't like immigrants. I can make something about immigrants. So little groups of people, I can micro-target messages, and I can aggregate all these groups. Maybe the groups don't know each other. They don't like each other. It doesn't matter. Just so long as they will all vote for me. Just so long as enough of these people can swing. Look at the Trump election in 2016. Hillary Clinton got over 3 million votes more than Trump. But Trump got the right votes for the Electoral College. You know, the Electoral College in the US exists to make sure that nobody who is a fool, who is ignorant, who's a sexual harasser, who's a monster, will ever be in the White House. You see, it works very well. So he won this, the Electoral College, with more than 3 million votes less than Hillary Clinton. This is because they could target the voters in the right parts of the United States in order to capture the majority of those seats. Today, in the United Kingdom, there is a government with Boris Johnson as Prime Minister. You may, if you followed the news, have seen that the election in December last month that was won by his party with a big majority, 80-seat majority. It's such a big majority that now Parliament is useless. It's just a rubber stamp for whatever Mr. Johnson wants to do. Just stamps, yes, yes, yes. It's not going to vote against him. So it's useless. It's no good. It's not a democratic organization that can hold the executive to account. But would you be surprised to know that on the electoral system that we have in the United Kingdom, same as in the United States, same as in Canada, same as in India, in that electoral system, what percentage of the electorate voted for Mr. Johnson's party? 29%. 29% of the vote has given him 100% of the power in the parliament. This is an example of how whole populations can feel left out, can feel resentful, can feel frustrated, because the democracy that should be for the people, should be for everybody, should be something which expresses our preferences and our interests, that democracy is not serving us. So this is why, after 100 years, democracy good, 2,500 years, democracy bad, looks as if democracy now in danger. But it's worth protecting. It's worth getting it right. If we can get our constitution right, if we can get our political culture right, if we can be more reactive, more proactive in engaging with our democratic order, then we can make sure that this system, which is the best of a lot of bad systems, can work. Gracias.